Have you ever looked at the grand museums, stately homes, and magnificent architecture of Europe and wondered, how did they afford all this? The answer, in many cases, is a story written in blood and gold, a story that takes us to the heart of Africa. For centuries, a massive transfer of wealth occurred, not through fair trade, but through force and exploitation. This is the story of how colonial empires were built on the back of Africa's immense resources. Let's journey back to the late 15th century. European explorers, initially seeking new trade routes to Asia, stumbled upon the vast riches of the African continent. It started with gold. The Portuguese, for instance, established trading posts along the West African coast, what they aptly named the Gold Coast, now modern-day Ghana. But this trade was rarely on equal terms. They exchanged cheap goods like textiles, mirrors, and alcohol for immense quantities of gold dust and nuggets, resources that had been part of local economies and cultures for generations. This early extraction was just a taste of what was to come. The initial trickle of wealth soon became a flood, fueling the burgeoning economies of Lisbon and beyond, financing further expeditions and the expansion of maritime power. The magnificent monasteries and towers built in Portugal during this era were quite literally decorated with the profits of African gold. It wasn't just a transaction. It was the beginning of a systematic drain of an entire continent's wealth. As centuries passed, the demand for another, more tragic commodity surpassed even that of gold: human beings. The transatlantic slave trade was the dark, beating heart of the colonial economy. Over 12 million Africans were forcibly captured, chained, and shipped across the Atlantic in horrific conditions to work on plantations in the Americas. They were the engine of a massively profitable triangular trade system. European ships would carry manufactured goods to Africa, trade them for enslaved people, transport those people to the Americas in a brutal journey known as the Middle Passage, and then sell them for cash crops like sugar, cotton, and tobacco. These crops were then brought back to Europe, processed in new factories, and sold for enormous profits. This cycle of exploitation generated unimaginable fortunes. Cities like Liverpool and Bristol in England and Nantes in France grew into major economic hubs directly from the profits of the slave trade. The wealth didn't just enrich slave traders, it funded banks, insurance companies, and the very industrial revolution that would propel Europe into a new age of global dominance. The unpaid labor of millions of Africans laid the financial foundation for modern Western capitalism. Then came the scramble for Africa in the late 19th century. Driven by industrial demand for raw materials, European powers carved up the entire continent among themselves. This wasn't about trade anymore. It was about total control. King Leopold II of Belgium's personal colony, the Congo Free State, is perhaps the most horrifying example. Under the guise of a humanitarian mission, Leopold turned the Congo into a massive forced labor camp. The global demand for rubber, needed for tires and industrial machinery, exploded. Congolese people were forced to meet impossible rubber quotas. Those who failed faced brutal punishments, including mutilation and death. The profits were astronomical. The immense wealth extracted from Congolese rubber and ivory went directly into Leopold's pockets, funding extravagant public works projects in Belgium, earning Brussels the nickname the Little Paris. He built grand arches, museums, and parks, all financed by the suffering of millions. The population of the Congo was decimated, dropping by as much as 50% during his reign, a genocide fueled by greed. The story was similar across the continent. In South Africa, the discovery of diamonds and gold sparked wars and the entrenchment of a system of racial segregation that would later become apartheid. The British Empire, through figures like Cecil Rhodes and his De Beers Company, consolidated control over the diamond mines. Black Africans were dispossessed of their land and forced to work in treacherous mines for pitiful wages, while the diamonds adorned European royalty and filled the vaults of London's financial institutions. The wealth from South Africa's mines helped solidify the British Empire's position as the world's leading economic power. Rhodes himself dreamed of an Africa painted red, from Cape to Cairo, all under British control, all for the purpose of extracting its wealth for the glory of the empire. In French West Africa, the colonial administration imposed heavy taxes and forced cultivation of cash crops like peanuts and cotton, which were then exported to France at fixed low prices. This system disrupted traditional subsistence farming, leading to food shortages and famines, while enriching French textile manufacturers and food processors. The infrastructure built during this time, the railways and ports, wasn't designed to benefit Africans. It was designed for one purpose: to efficiently transport resources from the interior to the coast, and from there to Europe. Every rail sleeper laid and every harbor dredged was part of a giant conveyor belt, moving Africa's wealth overseas. The legacy of this colossal theft is still felt today. When the colonial powers finally withdrew, they left behind nations with economies structured not for their own development, but to continue serving the needs of the global north. They left behind arbitrary borders that grouped rival ethnic groups together, planting the seeds for future conflicts. The systemic extraction of both human and natural resources for over 400 years left the continent impoverished, while simultaneously providing the capital that financed the development and prosperity of Europe and the Americas. The magnificent buildings, the industrial might, the generational wealth, much of it traces back to the gold, the diamonds, the rubber, and the blood of Africa. Understanding this history is not about assigning blame in the present, but about acknowledging a fundamental truth of our interconnected world. It helps us understand global inequality and the complex, often painful foundations upon which our modern world was built. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through a difficult but essential part of our shared history. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. See you next time.